Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 9th podcast of Renew Your Mind. With us today, we have Pastor Paul Grunenberg, our senior pastor at the First United Methodist Church of Gaylord. And we have Pastor Jordan Chambers, our youth and family minister, pastor. And then you have myself, Dana Hall, as moderator. We are doing a series of episodes getting to know our pastors better. Pastor Paul started just this past July in Gaylord, so we're trying to get him used to the community, and we're trying to learn a little bit more about him, and trying to learn more about Pastor Jordan as well. So where we're at right now, and if we're starting at in the adulthood of Pastor Paul. So if you want to learn a little bit more about childhood and things that led up to this, you will want to listen to episodes 6, 7, and 8. All right, so right now we're at the point where a guy is working at Ford Motor Company, and he is on his way to ministry, but he hasn't told us how or why or anything, not all the details. And I think there is a future wife involved in this period of life. So he's going to start to tell us a little bit about that. So, Pastor Paul?
So one of the aspects of being in church is there are other people. It's a community of faith. There are people, as I alluded to in a previous episode, there were a number of people my age. And there happened to be a Sunday school class that four guys and I started on the bequest of the Christian ed director. And as that Sunday school class began to grow, we were all singles, and there were a number of young ladies that began to join that class. And one of those young ladies just happened to be Lene Johnson at the time. And as we did events, I think apple picking was one where I was like, who is she? And then there was we had a seminary student as a summer intern, and we went to the Boblo boat as a kind of going away party for him, and she went to that, and I was like, who is this girl? And eventually I asked her out to go to the zoo. So the zoo was our first big date, and it was in early spring, and we went to the zoo and had a really good time. And then this lady who had gone through a divorce happened to be really good family friends with her parents. In fact, her parents went to her Sunday school class. And she was like, you better be nice to her.
Laying down the law.
Laying down the law.
That's funny.
And so she started coming over to the apartment. I remember the first time. I mean, if you've been dating, you remember that first time. We were walking around the apartment and our hands brushed. Woo! That was good stuff. That was good stuff. And so at that point, I was also wrestling with a call to ministry. And I was a youth sponsor. We had a praise team that I was a part of starting, some other ministries that I was a part of. And I decided, after talking with my pastor about what I was experiencing as far as a call from God, I took a class down at Wayne State University. It was actually a satellite from a theological seminary. And there were two classes they were offering. One was on, I think it was on one of the Gospels, a class on the Gospel, and the other one was on Christian ed. And I really wanted a class, but the Gospel one was full. So I took the Christian ed class. Lene thought I was taking that because I was a youth sponsor, which made sense.
Yeah.
And I guess that suggests I wasn't maybe quite as open with her in regard to what I was experiencing. We were still dating, and about halfway through, it was October 31st, 30th, Devil's Night. Sent her on a scavenger hunt, sort of, kind of. And the last place she needed to be was the chapel at the church, and the Christian ed director was in on this. And so the church was open, and I asked her to marry me.
Oh my.
Yeah, the last thing she needed to do was look on the chapel altar where I had a rose, and inside the rose was the engagement ring. And so
That's pretty cool.
it was really neat, and she wishes I did more of that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
walking on the
How come-
clouds,
how
right?
come
Gotta
you
be careful
waited
what
that
kind
long?
of precedents you set because that's an expectation. Yeah.
But it was also during that time that Christian ed class, I did the work, and I was just a little bit disappointed. If this is what seminary is, and I'm just engaged, and all of a sudden, all of the things about being engaged, preparing for a wedding, kind of took over, and my focus kind of shifted a little bit. And then in May, we got married. And then about 4 months later, we were living at my apartment. We decided to buy a home, and we got a home. And all of a sudden, all of the things of making the home yours. And, it's 3 or 4 years later, and there's some kids now.
Mm-hmm.
And God, I was doing my devotions one morning, and God had, well, let me take a step back. When we talk about God speaking to us, God's major avenue of speaking to us is through the Bible. And this is what got me to even begin thinking of seminary. I was reading through Isaiah chapter 6 in my devotionals, and that was Isaiah's call to ministry. And when Isaiah was cleansed by the coal on the altar, God says, "Whom shall I send?" And Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." And I read that, and as I read that, it wasn't Isaiah responding anymore. It was me.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am, God, send me. And so that's what started me on that journey. Okay, then class, the seminary class, then getting married, then having kids. And so it was another morning of devotions. It was a Monday morning, and I can't remember what I was reading, but there was that presence of God, and I said, "Okay, God, if you want me to go into full-time ministry." Now, I had been doing other types of ministry around the church.
Mm-hmm.
Praise team, youth work, was getting into the outreach, also nominations. Starting, I think I was the vice chair of the ad board at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Okay, God, if you want me in full-time ministry, you're going to have someone." So this is putting my Gideon's fleece down.
Right. Testing the dew. Yeah.
That's right. It's going to be wet and the ground dry, or the ground's going to be wet and the fleece is going to be dry. And I said, "God, if you want me to go into ministry, somebody who knows nothing about this between you and me is going to have to say something to me about it today." So there's my stake in the ground, my fleece on the ground. And so I worked at Ford. We were down at the Renaissance Center, went there. Now, I was in a Bible study, so there were some other Christians who knew me at Ford, but no one said anything to me that day. And we happened to have a church softball game. I think it was our first playoff game. And I said to Lene, I'm going to go a little early, warm up. And so I get there and I start to warm up. And there's another guy who comes, and his name is John. John is actually looking to become a certified candidate for ministry in the United Methodist Church. So we're warming up, and, we didn't say
Did you
much.
know that?
I knew that at the
Okay.
time,
All right.
because we went then, after a little bit of stretching, we went for a run.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay, God, nothing's happening." I said, "I'll help you out." "Hey, John, how's the candidacy process going?" John, blah, blah, blah. He tells me about the candidate. I said, here it comes, God. Here's your best opportunity. John says, "So how's it going with you, Paul?" "Oh, blah, 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 blah." And I said, I remember thinking to myself, "God, you've just missed your best chance today." We get done and running, and we start throwing the ball back and forth. And just chit chat. And then Jim, this older guy, comes by who's on the team. Now he's way older than me. He's 45.
That's really old.
Really old,
yeah.
isn't it? To a guy who's not yet reached 30. Or no, I guess I was in my early 30s. But Jim was an old guy. And, and I've talked to him about this since then. He starts throwing. So John and Jim are on one side and I'm on the other side. So I'm throwing between these two. John says, kind of rotates his shoulder and says, hey, I'm warmed up. I'm done. I said, Jim, I'll keep throwing with you. So Jim and I are throwing back and forth. Now, my first roommate, Chris, had already gone into the ministry. He was in seminary. A guy that had come down from Saginaw, a friend of mine from Saginaw, who I invited to play softball with us, and subsequently he gave his life to the Lord and was headed into seminary.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim and I are throwing back, and he says, so what is it about all you boys from Saginaw going into ministry? Out of the blue. And I said, well, what do you mean? Because I sense God's arrow is pointing out of my forehead now. He goes, you or Chris, Kevin, and you, what about you? And I said, well, shouldn't we all be in ministry? He goes, well, yeah, but I think, and all of us, I knew God had made the fleece wet and the ground dry. And so I knew that that's where I needed to go. And then I went home and Lene and I talked and got some applications from some seminaries and looked at filling them out. And I looked at the financial costs and I'm like, God, there's just absolutely no way. And, when somebody drags their feet, you can see two kind of grounded marks.
Mm-hmm.
Those were mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be another 5 years. And I can't remember. Another lady whose son was older than me, I think he was in his early 50s, had mentioned, and this was a really spiritual lady, had mentioned how disappointed he was in his life that he had not answered the call that God had placed on him, and he had waited so long. Couple that with a video, Tony Campolo video that I had seen probably about 15 years before, where he said 80 and 90-year-olds, he did a kind of a survey with them and said, if you could do anything differently with your life, what would that be? And they said, take more risks, build more relationships. And this was a huge risk. I had been working at Ford. I had a wife and 3 kids. We were homeschooling at the time. And I was responsible for their welfare.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked with Lene, and I remember Lene saying, if you're going to do this, we need to do this. But don't ask me again. Now, she doesn't remember that, but I do. So we went off to seminary in 1999 and took 3-4 years to get through. And like Jordan was talking about his year of wilderness, I had 3 jobs at one time. I was driving school bus. I was working at the school in a maintenance department and painting dorms in the summer. And God just provided. I did have some money put aside, in Ford stock. It was a matching program, and that got used. There were people that were giving us money to exist. And that was such a fruitful time for us. There were some times where I threw up my hands and said, God, I don't know how we can make the next week. Yep. And somehow we did. We had bought a house. We did have some debt, but when we sold the house, we were going to a parsonage, so we were able to pay off most of that debt. And it's just been a thrill ride since then. They started out at 9, 7, and 5. And so they were 13, 11, and 9 when we came out.
Got it. And then where did you go? Where was your first church that you pastored at?
It was in Pickford, up in the
Oh, it was
Upper
in
Peninsula.
Pickford. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We experienced nearly a 40-degree swing in temperature. Talk about not being acclimated yet.
Yeah.
But it was a great time of ministry. That was a wonderful church. And when the district superintendents came down to seminary and said, "Well, where do you see yourself in ministry, whether it was urban or rural?" And I talked about, my mom and dad were getting older. I would like to be within an hour's drive. And her dad had recently become paralyzed from the mid-abdomen down, and we wanted to be within a day trip of the Detroit area. And so a week later, the DS from the Upper Peninsula calls and says, "I know this wasn't what you were hoping for, but..." And it was a great ministry. We had asked to be somewhere south of Midland. So this was only 3.5 hours,
Yeah.
4 hours north?
Oh, boy. And then from Pickford, you went to
Heartland.
Heartland. Okay. And now
And-
you're not quite back to Pickford, but
No,
back north.
we're in the mountains of Gaylord.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Mountains of Gaylord.
Oh,
So it's been a thrill ride. In each place, God has worked on me. What was the one guy from Hassani? I mentioned him on Sunday from the
Yeah.
Voice of the Martyr. And he said his prayer was to make me more perfect, or make me more, I can't remember exactly, make me more, or perfection in you, God. And that's what God's been doing, is making me more perfect in him, helping me to be more reliant on him instead of my abilities. But God uses our abilities too.
it's hard to get out of our own way. At least it is for me. Oh, wow. Well, I don't really know where we're at in our segment. Minute-wise, we're about 17 minutes in. What else in that area? I mean, is there anything else you want to touch on? Like what are your thoughts for the Gaylord community? Anything you have, in mind, or are you waiting for God to show you what he has in mind for this area?
Well,
Or-
that's a great question, but I think it's going to take another segment to answer
That's what I
that.
thought.
But let me go back to family and kids.
Yes, please.
It was a thrill to be a pastor up in Pickford, but it was a really unique place in that my two boys really, really played, really liked to play hockey. And so we got into hockey up there. And, when I talk in terms of being in ministry, you're the new pastor in town, and Pickford can be a kind of if you didn't grow up here, you're
Yeah.
not that you're shunned, but it's not necessarily,
You're not one of them.
you're not one of them.
Yeah.
And but I was the pastor of the church,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some great people there, and they made us feel like home. One guy who actually at one point in his life took all the horses from Mackinac and housed them there over the winter months.
Oh, how cool.
Invited us to go horseback riding, and my daughter loved horseback riding. And so, I mean, God just really worked a lot of stuff out there. And
Tell me again how many years you were in Pickford?
9 years in Pickford.
Oh, so that's quite a while. I'm trying to do the math. Did your children graduate from Pickford?
So my daughter homeschooled all the way through.
Oh, homeschooled. That's right.
And then
That's
my
right.
two
Yep.
sons did end up going. Luke went 2 years to Pickford and
Okay.
graduated, and then Seth went all the way through. Well, he homeschooled us last year.
Got it.
But then they all ended up at Northern Michigan University for college.
Yeah, that's
So-
pretty neat. Yeah, so now you have to keep going there. Your kids, are they graduated from college now, or?
They are.
Okay.
They are.
So they're all graduated.
They
Okay.
are. They're all working. My oldest son, my middle child, he's married to a wonderful young lady, and they're making their journey together down in the Clarkston area. And so it's been good. Jordan, you're just still on the young side of kids moving out.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead,
with our
Jordan.
fourth on the way,
Yes.
which is pretty exciting. due in December 8th. We're very excited about that. With Mariah, she's 6 and going on 16, and she's just a smart little girl. But we were just talking. My wife and I were just talking about it. How she'll be in youth group. She's halfway
Oh, that's
to
right.
being in youth group. And I'm
Put it in that perspective, it makes you think.
yeah. It's like we've had it that long. I mean, at the same time, that's not very long. It's just, you reflect family life is just. It's been, like you say, a thrill ride's a good word for it, and adventure is a great word for it. And Laura and I both. That was one of the connecting things that we had. Was both of us wanted very involved, active, and bigger families. We wanted to create our own family together that would be a strong central unit. Yeah, and that's definitely been a lot of fun as we've been going through that.
It's just becoming stronger.
Oh yeah. And each kid, they're so unique. And
Aren't they?
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's just too much fun.
Yeah. As soon as they go from one phase, you get into another,
Yeah.
and you learn. I have all new things to learn. Well, that's great. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, and really appreciate your thoughts. And our next episode, we are going to start speaking a little bit about ministries, and we're going to talk about. We've heard about Pastor Paul and a little bit about Pastor Jordan's ministries, and then we're going to talk about the ministry opportunities for each one of us. So, Pastor Jordan, when this airs, we will be after VBS, I believe.
Yeah, this will be either right during or right around the
So
week of VBS.
Tell us a little bit about the virtual VBS that you're going to put on.
Well, the cool thing is, even if you haven't been able to catch it right on the day that it airs, you can start VBS whenever you want. Just go to the YouTube channel or go to our Facebook page. It'll be in our videos. Or go to our website. It'll be in our media there. And you can just watch whatever. You can even watch all 5 of them right in a row if you wanted, and go through the whole VBS program if you'd like. It's a lot of fun. There's games, there's songs, there's crafts, and then there's some wonderful biblical messages that you'll be able to pull from those days. And hopefully it'll be a time that, if you like it, and we really want to encourage you to do this, if you found value in our VBS program this year, please share it with someone else. We want other kids, doesn't matter if they go to this church, doesn't matter if they're even in this community, doesn't even matter if they live in Michigan. Just if you know someone who would have a little bit of time to hop onto our YouTube channel and enjoy that program, and you think it would be effective for them, please share that. That is the best way that we can get this communicated, is for folks outside of the walls to decide to take it upon themselves and say, yes, I know someone who could watch this video and enjoy it. So, VBS, exciting times, great times. And don't forget, it's always there. Even if you're like, I want to watch that all over again. It was just too much fun. I want to sing the songs again. Go back and watch them. They're always there for you.
Yeah, and I like how you said to share it with someone else, because then you can have just as much fun
Yeah,
sharing it with
absolutely.
one of your friends or family. And if you feel like you'd like to join us in person, feel free to join us at 215 South Center Street. Sunday services, we have a traditional service at 9 a.m. and a contemporary at 10:45 a.m. Feel free to contact the church at 989-732-5380. And if you have any questions or things that you want to hear us talk about in the future, we would love to hear that. So thanks for your time, and until we meet in our next episode, thanks a lot.